So, King Arthur, all the representations of King Arthur in all the movies is wildly inaccurate. Um, the movie with Clive Owen in it is a little bit better. Uh, Most portrayals of King Arthur has him looking like he's from the uh, the Renaissance or high medieval period, or even just middle medieval period. Knights in shining armor on horseback, and King Arthur in the Round Table with Guinevere and Lancelot and all these famous people, right? No, no, that wouldn't have been King Arthur. And he wouldn't have looked like a Templar, which is how they usually show him. There was no armor, and his castle would probably have been atop of a hill or a mound that was built for prehistoric times, built out of some stone and some wood. That's it. Or it was old medieval or an ancient Roman ruin. They show him as English. One thing we know is that there is a historical Arthur. He's definitely not English. There's nothing English about him. Arthur, all the stories place him in the 5th or 6th century. And who is he fighting? The Anglo-Saxons. He's fighting the people who will become known as the English. He's trying to kick that culture out because, like the Europeans invading America, they were wiping the people out. They were displacing them. Conquest. This is the Anglo-Saxons did. The Anglo-Saxons and the Jews. They were pagans. They were not Christians. And King Arthur was not. He was either Briton or he was either Celtic or Roman. This is why Ireland claims King Arthur for themselves. So, what do we know? We know that the Anglo-Saxons invaded. Initially, they became a protectorate in Kent, and then Britons were so stupid, at least one of the governors was, that he invited these people over. And they sent word back to their people and saying, we can take this whole place. So they started to. But it got arrested. It got stopped at the border of Wales. And there's this mysterious figure, Arthur, and it may be a title or something like that. They really don't know. We do know is that he wasn't knight in shining armor. Would have obviously either spoken Latin or Celtic or a combination of the two. There's no mention of a Grail or Guinevere or any of these romances at the beginning. That gets added on later. But somehow they get stopped. The Anglo-Saxons get stopped at the border of Wales. So what would King Arthur have been like? Well, this is at the beginning of the Dark Ages, so it's no wonder why sparse evidence survives. And they would have probably had chainmail, probably remnants of weapons from either the Celts or the Romans, left stuff that's left over. And they would have seen themselves as the indigenous Christians, and probably Christianity and a form of quasi-Druidism, fighting against these Nordic people from Germany and Denmark and Sweden. Now this is before the Vikings, but these people are coming from the exact same area as the Vikings, which I'll get into the Vikings later. The one strange thing that we do find is they find this inscription from the 5th century. It says Arturag. Now the first part of it is Latin, and the last part of the name is Celtic. So it's the right type of name, and it has the same inscription. Now they don't think, when modern historians look at this, they don't see Arthur as a name, but a title or a name given to somebody, not somebody with a born name. Arthur could refer to the standard of the bear, so it could have been a leftover centurion or military guy that was left. That's where the modern rendition of Arthur comes from, because they're thinking it was a leftover guy from you know, a soldier that remained there after the Roman army pulled out about 415 when Rome was sacked. They had to pull back from there. So it was seen as a hero, but he would have not been so much a king as a warlord. Now, does this show us, oh, definitely there was an Arthur? No. But something happened, and it was a resistance against the Anglo-Saxon, and that would form the border of Wales today. Some people put him up in Scotland, but he's also said to have fought the Scots and the Picts. The Scots originally were the Celts of the Isles, and the Picts, I think, are what we now call Scots. But the Arthur of what you see in books and stuff like that did not exist. Now, remember, this is coming from the early Dark Ages. This is a time when people say, oh, wizards and good wizards and bad wizards. Good wizards would be somebody connected with the church or Christianity. A bad wizard would be something like pagans. And if you look at the early manuscripts of the Bible or the Book of Kells and stuff like this coming from the British Isles, you see that. You see spells and invocations and curses and stuff like that in religious texts. Same, like, was there a real Beowulf? Well, they found that the battle that takes place at Beowulf did happen. So there's a historical remnant there. Does that make the character real? No. But Arthur, there's something about it where there's some historicity. So we know that to be true. The Saxons, the Anglo-Saxons, were stopped at the border of Wales for some reason. Oh, well, they could have just stopped or this or that. Well, if it's a land grab, why would you leave Wales alone? That's farmland. So there was some halting of the Anglo-Saxons, but this could be I mean, it could be the people used the standard of the bear. It didn't necessarily have to be a guy. It could be when you're pushing a mass group of people away from an area. At some point, there's going to be more of them than there is of the army, and they can just turn around and boom and slam into any army. And the Anglo-Saxons didn't really have army. They were more kind of like the Vikings, just raiding and smashing and grabbing. And these are not like the Roman army. That's why the Anglo-Saxons and these Norse people set foot on any Roman territory. I mean, where there's battle lines, where there's indigenous people rising up or people right across the Rhine invading, that's a different story. But of sailing all across the North Sea just to get your ass handed to you, they didn't do that. One of the reasons why the Vikings didn't set foot on the continent of Europe until after Charlemagne was dead, because he would have just shredded them. I mean, they could rob monasteries like Lindisfarne, stuff like that. I'll get to that. They're doing some stupid movie on mini-series on the Vikings, as if they were noble. In case they, but they were much more to them. They had families and their intricates and stuff. Of course they did. In their own lands, they had no regard for human life outside their own lands. tortured the hell out of people and killed them and slaughtered innocent people. As if these people didn't have mothers, as if they were spawned from demons or something. I mean, this is just silly. If they didn't have wives and children, then they couldn't continue on. So this surprise of they actually had houses and cooked and lived in places. They weren't devils out of the sea. I mean, people acting surprised at this stuff irritates me. But of the Arthur legend, how much is actually based on actual characters, we don't know. But we can say who didn't exist and what did not happen. And King Arthur, the Round Table with Camelot and all this high courtly stuff. No, there might have been a Camelot, but it was probably on top of a hill somewhere with just a few stone buildings, mostly made out of wood. I mean, not even William the Conqueror had stone castles. I mean, they were on top of hills, and they were wooden, kind of like what you see in Braveheart. Although Braveheart, I could go to town on the history of that, but that's just too boring for me. But I want to make it clear, I'm talking about King Arthur. I'm using a myriad of legends that change, and I think I depict that in what I'm talking about in this series that I'm doing. But there was something that sparked this, and it was the Anglo-Saxon invasion. So all the illustrations and representations of Arthur, I think we can easily say, just dismiss these as romantic fantasies from the Victorian era. They want to place Arthur in the 5th and 6th centuries, but the idea of kings and even feudal system hadn't developed yet. This is post-Roman Empire, just at the end when the Roman Empire collapses, and you have these marauding raiders coming through and conquering. The Germans are now coming through and, taking Gaul and taking what would become England and destroying all these places. And Avalon. That's an Albion or Avalon were just names for England. And so, it was an island that sunk. It was probably the Isle of Wight if you're talking about a sacred place for Avalon. That's it. But there's no island in between Britain and France or Britain and Spain. I probably should do one on Atlantis and show that it's the Minoans and that it's not past the Pillars. Initially, I thought Pillars of Hercules. It could be referring to something different because we know the Pillars of Hercules to be the Rock of Gibraltar. Where Spain and Africa almost touch. I was thinking maybe at that point it's referring to islands. No, couldn't fix it to do that, but it's the Minoan civilization, but the myth got blown up too much. But that's another story. So Arthur, he was at the very beginning of what we call the medieval or Dark Ages or Middle Ages, and it could have been a person. That maybe it's not a person, but we do find an inscription that would fit exactly and it's from the exact same time period. So maybe 50-50 shot there was an actual guy. Inscriptions about him, not so much. But that's not necessarily what the series is dealing with. I'll get to what it's actually dealing with, but for right here I just want to let you know, some people might be confused. Do I really believe there was a King Arthur? This and that? Can't say for sure there wasn't, but of what's depicted, at least in De Morte d'Arthur or Morte d'Arthur, no, these are romanticized ideas. And I know the Thomas Mallory's work is not from Victorian times, but our descriptions of them are. But even Thomas Mallory's work, no, it turns him into a king from the 13th or 14th centuries. So wouldn't have gone down like that. And he would have been a warlord, not a king. Take it easy.